Dumelang, Sanibonani, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Virtual Symposium of Harnessing Data Science for Health Discovery and Innovation in Africa. This event is facilitated and hosted by the National Institute of Health Common Fund. My name is Pule Makadibe. I'm here with my colleagues from Know Innovation, the facilitation team that is responsible for supporting this event, and we're your hosts for this virtual symposium this week and next week. Now, let me give you a quick overview of our next 2 hours. We'll start off with a welcoming remarks from Amit, and we'll have a data science partnerships overview. After that, we'll have the panelists join us with their highlights, and then we'll have a Q&A session by our panelists. After that, we'll go into breakout sessions where we get to meet in smaller groups and connect around the issues around partnerships. And then we'll come back into the main plenary for a conclusion. Now, I would like to begin with a welcome by Amit Mistry, our senior scientist at the Fogarty International Center of Advanced Study in Health Science at the NIH. Welcome, Amit, to the stage.
Thank you so much, Puleng. Again, my name is Amit Mistry, and I'm representing the Fogarty International Center at NIH. And just to set the stage for today, as many of you joined us yesterday, you learned about the 4 different funding opportunities that make up the DSI Africa program. The rest of our program for this week and next week will focus more on cross-cutting priorities of the program over the next several years. And today, I'm very happy to welcome you to a panel focused on data science partnerships. All of the 4 funding opportunities strongly encourage applicants to form partnerships because our goal is really to help form a robust ecosystem of partners that include representatives from the government, from private sector, from NGOs, as well as academics and other key stakeholders. There is one requirement for applicants that I should point out. For the Research Hubs funding opportunity, that does require that the lead applicant institution comes in with 2 partners other than themselves. One of those 2 partners must be a non-academic African organization. Beyond that, for all the funding opportunities, we really encourage partnerships, but there aren't any specific requirements for the programs. The goals of today's discussion, we have a really diverse panel with us today. The goals of today's discussion are really to explore why partnerships beyond academia are really important to fields such as data science, and also to discuss strategies for forming effective and productive partnerships. Thank you all again, once again, and I'll hand it over to Puleng and Maggie.
Thank you very much, Amit. As Puleng mentioned earlier, we're with Know Innovation, or you'll hear us referred to as KI. That's the KI in KaiStorm. So we're a team of facilitators that specialize in accelerating scientific innovation and helping researchers from different disciplines generate exciting and novel research. And lately, because of COVID-19, we found ourselves hosting a lot of virtual events and workshops and conferences like this one. We've learned it takes a lot of people. So I want to acknowledge my team, Puleng, Joe, Emma, and Connie, who are here to make sure things go well today. A few key details before we jump into the content. One is that you'll only be able to participate in the breakout sessions if you've joined with the Zoom app, not through your browser. So if you have joined only through your browser and not using the app, now's a good time to very quickly jump off and do that. It's a very quick download and you can come back on. We want to make sure that you can join the breakouts later in the session. If you have any tech questions at all, or you get lost at some point, you get bumped out, you get something, you can always go to the Need Help page on the KaiStorm platform, and we'll have somebody there to help sort it out for you. We did see a couple of questions that you've left for the panelists on the KaiStorm question page for this particular event. We've shared them with the panel. But if you have additional questions today, we ask that you continue to leave them on the KaiStorm questions for partnership panel page. Maybe Emma or Joe, you can pull people there. You can peek back and forth between this Zoom window and that KaiStorm page. We are monitoring that page, but just to clarify, for now, the chat in this Zoom room is closed, not to distract from listening to the panelists. We will open it for you later. finally, we are recording this session today. If you want to review the video later, you'll be able to see it on the KaiStorm platform or on the NIH YouTube channel. And I guess I just want to show you, if you are somebody who uses social media, here's how you can talk about this with other people. You can use the hashtag DSI Africa, hashtag NIH Africa Data, or hashtag No Innovation. And we welcome you to tell the world about what you're hearing about data science partnerships and about this entire program. We're happy to share it with people. Let me hand it over to Puleng.
And at this point, we're really curious to hear from you. You'll see a link in the chat to a short poll, and we have just 2 questions that we hope you'll give us an answer. The first question is, what region in Africa are you or your organization most interested in? And then the second question is, what are the 3 words that you feel describe an effective partnership? So my invitation is for you to click on the link on the chat and answer those 2 questions, and we'll give you a couple of seconds for that. Fantastic. With that, we'd like to now go to our panel discussion. And I'm going to invite onto the stage our panel moderator, Dr. Brennan, the director of the National Library of Medicine at the NIH. She led the National Library of Medicine since 2016, and under her leadership, it's become the hub of data science at NIH. Dr. Brennan is a huge champion of data-powered health and data-driven discovery, building on her background in industrial engineering, information technology, and clinical care and nursing. Now I would like to hand over to Dr. Brennan to set the stage for today's discussion. Patty, over to you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good morning and good afternoon to all who are in attendance today. I'm delighted, as the director of the National Library of Medicine and part of the team that has put together the DSI Africa program with the Common Fund, to be here with you today. Thank you so much for participating in this virtual symposium, launching this new Common Fund initiative, Harnessing Data Science for Health Discovery and Innovation in Africa, DSI Africa. We are happy to be part of the DSI Africa leadership, and I'm very pleased to be joining you today to moderate a very important panel. We're going to be focusing on efforts of partnerships. Now, you heard from Dr. Collins in his opening video. This is not your typical NIH initiative. We are actively encouraging partnerships. We are providing specific resources for partnerships, and we are encouraging that these partnerships go beyond academia to bring new and important voices into the health sector to understand the health conversation, to form a robust ecosystem that links government actors, the private sector, NGOs, and other stakeholders. We believe that these partnerships are vital to building a sustainable network for health discovery in Africa by African scientists with African data. The partnerships must also cross disciplinary divides, bringing in health sciences, engineers, computer scientists, and experts who are in data. We've designed our agenda today to bring together a series of individuals who have experienced partnership in many ways. We're going to have a forum available for you to explore both the people explorer and the partner profiles, as well as informal networks, so that you can meet some of the people who may share your own interest. My remarks begin today with a brief discussion about partnerships and the NIH. Our goals for this entire initiative are to share funding about the funding opportunities, but mostly today to be exploring the state of data science in Africa and to encourage networking across the disciplines, the sectors, and the geography of Africa. What is unique about our session today is the focus on partnerships, which we believe are key to mounting successful proposals under this funding opportunity and successful knowledge building for health and health improvement in Africa. We urge you to remember that academics who are pretty good at partnering with other academics must go beyond partnerships with academics, go beyond their home institutions to be able to ensure an impact on health. Let me take a couple minutes to talk with you about partnerships as the NIH experiences them right now. One of our lead partnerships is something called STRIDE, Science and Technology Research Infrastructure for Discovery, Experimentation, and Sustainability. This is a public-private partnership with Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud to provide state-of-the-art data and compute capabilities, training and education, innovative technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. Importantly, we are moving high-value data sets into cloud instances, such as the Sequence Read Archive, our genomic short read archive from the National Library of Medicine. This is now publicly available in the cloud services and can be accessed by anyone. We are also partnering with institutions around the world who receive NIH funding to be able to make use of the cloud instances for efficient storage and further research. A second initiative I want to tell you about is ABLE, Artificial Intelligence for Biomedical Excellence. This is another Common Fund initiative, a 7-year, $160 million initiative that will create data design centers, improve the hardware and software resilience for analytics, enrich our existing data resources, but importantly, stimulate the building of new gold data sets that are AI friendly, machine learning ready. And we'll also be building tools for the assessment of this. A third program I'd like to talk with you about is the way the NIH is partnering with healthcare systems to make the data from healthcare delivery more accessible to research. Move with this slide from left to right with me, and you'll see we begin with a patient phenomenon that by using NIH-supported terminologies, SNOMED, LOINC, RxNorm, we're able to characterize that patient phenomenon in a standard way, which should assist in connecting data across institutions. The US Core Data for Interoperability is a 27 categorical organization of what data must be in essential clinical records. We are also encouraging the messaging format FHIR, the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource, to make sure that ultimately there is an easy flow of data from the clinical care facility to the research environment. Now, finally, I'd like to talk to you about an important partnership that may be most relevant to those of you in sub-Saharan Africa, and that is the partnership with the Gates Foundation, provided by Stephen Kern, who will be attending part of this session. The Gates Foundation has launched an analytical platform called the International COVID-19 Data Research Alliance. Gates is quite committed to reaching out into countries around the world to provide easy, accessible, and low-cost compute resources. Their vision is to unite data from international clinical trials and health research to enable discovery everywhere and reduce the harm of the pandemic. And their mission from the Gates Foundation is to build a trustworthy international partnership for enduring analysis to support the world response to COVID. This is an example of several different partnerships that we're engaged with as an enterprise level. You'll have a chance to hear about novel partnerships across Africa from our panelists today. You see on the screen the 6 panelists that we expect to hear from today: Brian Gitta, Catherine Kyobutungi, Julie Makani, Beatrice Murage, and Alicia Walcott-Bryant. We are hoping that Minister Senge is able to join us. He's a bit tied up at this moment. Right now, I'm going to be turning back to encourage the panelists to give their opening views, summary of their short videos, which I'm sure you've already gotten to enjoy. I want to thank the organizers of the session, invite you to come to visit us sometime at the National Institutes of Health. And now I'm ready to turn back.
So Patty, did you want to go right to the panelists 2 minutes or?
Sure, I'm ready to do that now if we're ready to begin. So I'm going to introduce each of our panelists from the various sectors to talk with you about partnerships that they have undertaken. There will be 6 short talks, about 2 minutes each, summarizing the key points that they gave in the videos that are available online. First, I introduce to you Brian Gitta. Brian Gitta is the CEO and co-founder of 2 organizations, Matibabu and Think IT, both of which are based in Uganda. Mr. Gitta is a computer scientist who invented Matibabu, a device that detects malaria without requiring blood. You heard about this in his video. He continues to be an entrepreneur, harnessing machine language learning and artificial intelligence to address the challenges of Africa. Mr. Gitta?
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. This is really a great opportunity to talk, or a great time to talk about data science in healthcare. And personally, I'm really excited about the growth of opportunities and the expanding capacity on the continent, and particularly within the sub-Saharan region. There is an incredible optimism for harnessing data science for the continent, and we have seen this with the new schools and institutes emerging of late, but also the strong multi-sectoral partnerships that are being created. We as data scientists, or as some people may call us techies, also need to rethink the delivery channels for the solutions that we offer to medical practitioners. There is a need to present the data in a format that is truly consumable for these practitioners, so that the practitioners themselves are involved over time. We also need to actively get involved in the advocacy around what the policies on health data and health platforms should look like in these communities on the African continent. Other than only basing on the global policies, we need to actually contextualize these policies to our communities. And finally, we still need to build awareness on the importance of data science for medicine, for disease tracking, and community health monitoring, such that we work with a variety of stakeholders taking ownership of the data in this process. I'm very excited to be here, sharing more about data science within the health infrastructure in Africa, and learning more from other people on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much for starting us off. I was particularly struck in your video yesterday about your idea of bridge building between the data scientists and the clinicians, and the importance of making sure that clinicians can actually benefit from the data that they are engaged with in gathering and helping us to understand. Our second speaker today represents the NGO, or the non-governmental organizations. Dr. Catherine Kyobutungi is an executive director of the African Population and Health Services Research Center in Kenya. Dr. Kyobutungi is trained as an epidemiologist and currently leads a premier research institution and think tank in Africa, focusing on generating evidence to drive policy and action to improve the health of Africans. Dr. Kyobutungi, we ask you to give a short summary of your excellent video that really stressed the importance that research and policy must go hand in hand. Dr. Kyobutungi.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And really what I was talking about in my video is that as academics, we need to realize that there are numerous decisions that are being made every single day, some excellent, but many of them terrible. And what makes data science, especially institutionalizing data-driven decision-making, exciting is that we have an opportunity to get things right most of the time. But for that to happen, as academics or as scientists, we must invest in long-term, mutually beneficial partnerships with different players in decision-making that include government, civil society, multilaterals, communities, patients, and various publics. And that as academics, we need to be continuously available to provide data or evidence, or our evidence-informed expert advice if and whenever it's needed. And that we need to move away from supplying data or evidence because we have it, to supplying evidence and data-informed expertise because it is what is needed at a particular point in time. And the second thing I talked about is that when we engage in data-driven decision-making initiatives, we need to ask ourselves what problem we are solving and whether that really is the problem we should be solving, especially with regard to the data value chain. And that we need to examine the whole data value chain and ensure that our intervention is addressing the right components of that chain. And more importantly, we need to determine whether our intervention is supported by data culture use.
Thank you very much. I apologize for how I mispronounced your name. Kyobutungi. I'll work on that. We are a little bit ahead of time, and so I'm actually going to pause for just a moment and remind those that are listening in the audience, please send your questions in. We're going to be having a question and answer period in about 15 minutes, but I'm going to take the moderator's privilege and ask Catherine to talk a little bit more about whether it's more difficult to get researchers to speak the policy language or to get policy people to understand how research informs their actions.
I think it's both. Researchers are not trained to do those things, and researchers are not oriented to do those things. Researchers don't have time to do those things. most funding for research does not include time for those things. So it takes two to tango, that researchers need to be capacitated to speak the right language, to understand how policy happens. And it also takes two to tango, that policymakers need to appreciate the process of research and how long it takes. And so, as I said, if you form these long-term partnerships, many times the engagement happens before there's any research happening. It happens during the research, and it also happens after the research. So in that case, there's no pressure that evidence must be fed or spoon-fed or force-fed to policymakers. That evidence fits into some kind of process where expertise is needed and researchers are available to provide it.
In my own work, which involved engaging lay people using computers in home care, we found that the policymakers needed a lot of help understanding that patients were actually quite competent in supporting their own home care, and they could use technology. Without the policymakers, though, we wouldn't have the protections in place for privacy and the technological linkages that are needed to ensure technology in home care. I really appreciated your comment about the fact that the partnerships often begin long before the research begins, and they provide the groundwork for being able to launch ideas, to seed new activities. We're looking forward to hearing more comments about your work in the future. Let me now turn to a representative from the academic sector. Julie Makani is Associate Professor in the Department of Haematology and Blood Transfusion at the Muhimbili University of Health and Allied Sciences, which is the main clinical, academic, and research center in Tanzania. Dr. Makani is trained in internal medicine, and she's an accomplished researcher and a recognized leader in sickle cell disease in Tanzania and worldwide. Her remarks to me really stimulated a social justice view of sickle cell, the challenge of getting genomic testing and treatment available globally, and the importance of understanding that it takes a very long time. Her tracing of the history from the original identification of sickle cell over 100 years ago to the resolution of the human genome to now the beginning of the first gene therapies for sickle cell is fascinating. And I encourage you to watch her video if you haven't seen it yet. We'll turn now to Dr. Makani for her overview of the work that she reported on in her video. Dr. Makani?
Thank you very much, Dr. Brennan. So my name is Julie Makani, and I'm speaking from Tanzania in East Africa. One of the things that's very exciting about the DSI Africa initiative is that for us in Africa, it will allow us to use data that we've been generating over the past 15 years, and others have been generating over the past 30 years. And these are data in three areas. One, it's in health. And as Dr. Brennan presented, we have health data from patients that we've been seeing at the clinic, in hospitals, and in the community over the past 15 years, trying to understand what are the causes of morbidity and mortality. The second, and this has culminated, or initially was from single center studies, and then culminated in Sickle in Africa, which is an initiative that is a Pan-African initiative involving 3 countries. The second area where we've been generating data is in H3 Africa, as part of the genomics and bioinformatics consortia that we've been working on, H3 Africa and H3 Biomet. We've been able to generate, again, genomic data as well as other omic data that has allowed us to understand disease epidemiology, disease mechanisms in Africa. And then finally, as mentioned, there's a huge initiative that's been announced between a partnership between the NIH and Gates Foundation to try and introduce gene-based therapy for sickle cell disease and HIV in Africa. Now, in order for us to apply the data that are generated from all these areas, we really need to have new types of partnerships that will be of use in allowing us to achieve the health benefits that we can from the knowledge that we have. The second thing that I wanted to emphasize, which is one of the things we talked, is the issue of equity and ethics, is that it is not acceptable to have a situation where we have the tools available, whether these are tools in data science, whether these are tools in health interventions. If we have tools that are available and we cannot utilize them for various reasons for populations in Africa or for populations who are not able to afford these interventions. And so I feel that data science and the application of data science is an opportunity for us to address the equity issue. And I'm hoping that we can use sickle cell disease as a model disease. This was first described 110 years ago. And hopefully within the next 10 years, we'll be able not only to understand how the disease occurs, but also find a cure using gene therapy and using data science tools to improve health and find a cure for sickle cell disease. Thank you very much.
Dr. Makani, thank you very much for your work. I want to reflect for a few minutes with us about whether you believe that there can be an in-country, single-country solution to the questions and the challenges you raised in your video, or do you believe we need to really look at a Pan-African solution and leverage resources? First question. The second is, if we have to look at a Pan-African solution, is that really feasible, and what are the partnership elements we have to put in place to make that work properly?
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. So one of the things that's almost unequivocal is the fact that this is an initiative that cannot be solved by one country alone. It can also not be solved by one discipline alone. So if it's geneticists trying to address this problem, or if it's data scientists, or if it's health researchers, it's impossible to address this issue working in silos or working in isolation. And this is why I think a key aspect of DSI Africa is partnerships. The second question is with regards to Pan-African. And one of the things that is absolutely fantastic that has been occurring in the past 15 years is the establishment, or is the formation of networks across Africa. When you look at H3 Africa, you have, this is 8 to 9 years now. When you look at H3 Africa, it's Pan-African. When you look at the Bioinformatics Network, H3 Bionet, it's Pan-African. When you look at Sickle in Africa, this is Pan-African. And I think in order for us to be able to address and achieve what we need to do very quickly and without spending a huge amount of money, we need to learn from each other by working together. And then finally, I think it's really linking in, not just across disciplines, but also across sectors. And I think this is where, for instance, looking at the data that are available in the healthcare system and linking this with the data that are available from the research sector, this is absolutely critical. And this requires not only Pan-African networks, but requires new interactions. So whether you're talking about the WHO Afro or the Africa CDC, they need to be working and interacting with the health researchers. In addition, they also need to be interacting and working with the academics, because this is the only way that we can increase the number and increase the quality of the data scientists who will be working on all these data that are available. Thank you.
I certainly appreciate your concern about the pipeline. We share that in the US. The need for skilled data scientists at all levels, from high-level researchers who can generate new algorithms to data science-informed clinical or biological researchers who can make use of those, to frankly data wranglers, technical people who can pull the data together, operate the platforms, is enormous right now. And we are playing catch up with trying to get our educational programs moving quickly enough to be able to do this. And we also recognize this is not a single country solution. We have to leverage learning and talent from around the world. Our first speaker today began with the perspectives from a startup, an innovation company. We're now going to return to the private sector with Dr. Beatrice Murage. Dr. Murage is a senior scientist at Philips Innovation. She's also based in Kenya. She's a physician with an MBA and an expert on digital innovation, entrepreneurship, and systems strengthening, which is a theme you heard in her video. She works closely with partners in government, private sectors, and international development, and her contributions today are going to bring the perspective of a multinational company. Dr. Murage.
Thank you so much, Patty. So I think we've just been listening to what the previous speakers have highlighted, and I completely actually support what they do say, which also ties in with the content that we'd shared in the keynote talk. So I'm going to focus on two other aspects. One of it is the concept of just shared value. So I've noticed just in practice in Philips and even before Philips, So currently in the private sector and the corporate sector, which is very business driven, of course, profit and loss as well. And just notice that over time, there tends to be a bit of misalignment in terms of priorities and even just getting what to do if you look at, let's say, our corporate organizations and academia especially. So for us at Philips, how we approach that is instead of looking at it as, let's say, different paths, is seeing how do you merge the two. And the concept of just having a way you identified shared value. And shared value from a point of just impact, especially. So impact has a social aspect to it. Impact does have an economic aspect to it. And when you do look at creating impact, then you're able to bring different stakeholders around the table. So academia, you know, a corporate like Philips, for example, even the non-profit sector or organizations that are not probably academia or corporate as it were, and just the need to identify what value do we want to deliver to the healthcare consumer. So it's also thinking about healthcare in a broader sense than just disease and helping people get better from their sickness, so to speak, or disease, but looking at wellness as well. How do you help people keep healthy? How do you look at a patient's journey, or let's say a healthcare consumer's journey from an end-to-end point, from a whole healthcare continuum piece, from home, in the hospital, beyond the hospital. So for us, it's been very important to just identify that shared value and what's in it for every stakeholder that's around that table, especially your key stakeholder. When you're looking at healthcare in Africa, I like the fact that Brian mentioned that bit to just bring in collaboration between the data scientists and your physicians. You have physicians around your table. You also have government. Government is a very big funder of healthcare, especially in the region. You also have, let's say, corporates like Philips and others that do come also around the table. And then you have academia. So it's not very clear cut in terms of this is the only role that you play. And when you look especially within data science, where a lot of things are becoming, let's say, for lack of a better word, platform, in every way, you need to work together. So just being able to identify what's the shared value, that's very important. And just even getting to understand who's going to pay for it. So more and more, there's a shift in the market that needs to also trickle down, not just within industry, but also in academia and even in the entrepreneurial space. And that is moving farther and farther away from heavily, let's say, loading that cost onto a government, for example. So what are healthcare consumers, I like to call them? They could be patients, they could be healthy people. What do they need? What would they be willing to pay for example? And it doesn't just have to be a visit to the doctor, but just getting to understand how does that healthcare need look like beyond, let's say, your typical corporate view or beyond, let's say, your typical academic view. I like the way they've sort of shifted this in the nonprofit sector, and I think there's a lesson there for us in corporate, in academia, and even in the entrepreneurial space. And that is a concept of shifting from, let's say, a corporate social responsibility into creating shared value, where you bring in an interesting mix of, let's say, your academic, your evidence pieces, and you bring in the business, let's say the problem, solution, and also just that value proposition fit. So being able to look at it from a lens that's wider than, let's just say, one industry by itself, that has been very important for us in corporate. Over to you, Patty.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just ask you one question to comment on briefly, and that is we've been hearing that Africa is lucky because they can leapfrog over legacy technologies to innovation. Is that really true?
I think we are. And I've seen it. We have, there's some sectors that have done an amazing thing. I'll not belabor the point. I mean, especially the financial tech sector, they've done amazing things there. And I must say in healthcare, having been in industry for quite a while and just starting out in industry, while doctors really just didn't even want to hear about EMRs, for example.
Yeah.
Just did not want to hear about them at all. And getting to a place they actually even have them on phones now and their applications, and you can be able to use it. There's ability to leapfrog because of two reasons. So one is just the technology availability. So there's a growing penetration. Of course, it depends on how that digital divide looks like, or sometimes it depends on where do people have access to the technology or not, they do not. But I know governments are really trying to just bridge that divide. So availability of technology, a simple thing like a smartphone. So if it's especially mobile, there's a very big possibility to leapfrog a lot of things. So that's one. Another thing is also being able to just give talent. Now, the difference, let's say, between healthcare and the financial sector is that we have a lot of sensitivity. It's a life and death situation, of course, in healthcare. There's a data privacy, data security. It's more stringent, I think. But that getting to see how do you just work around the regulatory barriers, because they are really high in healthcare, but still leverage that mobile penetration, so to speak, and just a very curious, very curious population, whether it's from the consumer side or from the delivery side. So to answer your question, I think, yes, there is possibility. There is a lot of possibility, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. We will now turn to Aisha Wolcott-Bryant. Aisha Wolcott-Bryant is also in the private sector. She is the research manager at IBM Research Africa, based in Kenya. Dr. Wolcott-Bryant leads a team of researchers and engineers using AI, blockchain, and other technologies to address a broad range of challenges. As you heard in her keynote, she'll be speaking to some of her cutting-edge work of IBM research on malaria and maternal child health. Dr. Wolcott-Bryant?
Hi, thank you. First of all, I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to be here, and so excited about this new opportunity that NIH is launching in Africa, and with its large focus on partnerships and collaboration. I think fundamentally that is required for us to make a big change, or the so-called leapfrog, as Patty just mentioned, here to transform healthcare and healthcare delivery in Africa. So in my talk, I talk about a few key examples in the way in which AI can be leveraged to help address some of our key, let's say, global health outcomes. So AI for global health, looking at two core areas, malaria control and maternal newborn child health, but most importantly, thinking about the techniques and the stakeholders we work with as we address these problems for global health. What I find most beautiful about this work is listening to the different partners and collaborators, the domain experts, on how they understand neonatal health, child health, maternal health, how they understand malaria and malaria modeling community, these different domain experts, and the idea that you can bring computation and AI together with these domain experts, along with, of course, we need to be working with the government and policymakers to make a huge transformative difference in these areas. I find that it is impossible to achieve our global goals as a continent without these diverse interdisciplinary partnerships. And there is something fantastic about leveraging newer technologies to help accelerate this progress. So AI is one of those examples, but also you can think about other technologies, even as Beatrice mentioned, such as mobile devices and so forth, as different means for consuming and engaging different end users, whether it's health workers, patients, and so forth. And I think that those modes of consuming information, so imagine an AI system gives you an outcome of one magic number. Well, how do you interpret that number? How does that number make any sense to your context? Do we know if this is ethically, fair and created properly with the right types of models? Do I understand that? So I think there's an element of both the deep technical AI science side, partnerships, and then finally, as well as the way to consume the output of technology and solutions that are developed with data science and AI. So I'm very glad to be here and looking forward to engaging with everyone further. Thank you, Patty.
I'm really delighted to hear you almost live. Your video was just fantastic. Unfortunately, Minister Senge has not been able to join us as yet. We hope that he will be able to join us. He's tied up with an examination, but I want to give a brief introduction to him, and then we're going to go to the question and answers. Moinina David Senge is the Minister of Basic and Secondary Education and the Chief Innovation Officer for the government of Sierra Leone. He has been a research scientist at IBM Research Africa, also in Nairobi. research is focusing on the intersection of analytics and healthcare. He was born and raised in Sierra Leone and was trained here in the US at the MIT Media Lab. His work focuses directly on medical imaging, material science, human anatomy, and computer-aided manufacturing. He has a long list of accolades in his bio, but he's really well known internationally as a high performance technology director. He's been president of an NGO that focuses on innovation challenges. He's been leading an Next Century Innovators Award, and he's also been working closely to develop innovative ways to address treatment of malaria. We will be hopefully hearing from him during our program. If you saw his video, you might know he also has a wide range of interests, including being a lyricist and a rapper and a clothing designer. I hope we'll be able to get to meet him later. But now we are going to go into the question and answer part of our session. I'm going to turn over back to Puliang for a few minutes to give some instructions, and then we'll be back with our panelists getting some questions for the next phase of our interaction. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. I wonder if anyone is curious about the results of the poll earlier, and Maggie is going to show us the results for keywords that you said define key partnerships, effective partnerships. What do you think of that? Have a look. Have collaborative communication, collaboration, equity, trust, cooperation, impact, respect, synergy. Fantastic. Common goals, impact. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maggie, for sharing. Now, I just want to note that we will handle the questions that you have left on Storm's page, and we'll also open up the chat for you to continue to add your questions. So please use the chat to add your questions for the panel. And now I'll hand over right back to Patty to continue with the Q&A session for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Puliang. I'm going to warm up our panelists by asking them to provide their 3 words about partnerships. What are the 3 words that characterize effective partnerships for you? And I'll begin first with Mr. Gitta. Brian?
My keyword for an effective partnership, I think, would be collaborative. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Kyobutungi, your 3 key words for collaboration?
Mine would be mutuality, respect, equity.
Mutuality, I like that very much. Dr. Makani.
Hello, my 3 words are equity, integration, and ethics.
Wow, these are great. Now we'll turn to Dr. Murage. Your 3 words?
I think also the same on the mutuality, but then also something about shared value.
Excellent. And Dr. Oops, I'm sorry, I've lost my place here. We'll go to Dr. Walcott Bryant.
Yes, I would say definitely collaboration, listening, and courage.
Courage, I like that. Now we're going to begin to some of the questions that came in from KI Storm. We'll also be monitoring the chat on the video, on the Zoom here. I'd like to begin by asking particularly to hear from both our private sector partners as well as our academic partners. How does one think about responsible relationships with commercial? How do you respect the rights of intellectual property, the rights of participants, the needs for commercialization? Could you speak to that, each of you? And I'm going to actually ask Dr. Walcott Bryant to begin, because that was the theme in some of her remarks.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
How do you characterize responsible collaboration with the commercial sector?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think a lot of the key words actually spoke to that. So there's definitely trust. There are rules of engagement when you engage with commercial and private sector. So there's trust around the data, how the health data is being managed, shared. All those rules need to be upfront in some way. Usually it's in legal documents and so forth. But I think, especially in healthcare, people are very sensitive to that critical personal information. And I think the first step is you must have an ethical and responsible, at least infrastructure or resource that manages that kind of private data, coming from a commercial and private sector perspective. It's not that you need to host it as private sector. It could be hosted even within an academic institution or a research institution on the continent. But I think in terms of engaging, that's like a foundational layer, is that trust and ethics. And then from there, there's a notion of innovation and value with partners.
Excellent, thank you. Beatrice, would you also like to speak to this, please?
I think it's also being able to see, besides the legalities, I think those have to be in place. It's also getting to see how you're able to, what do you domicile it within? So we do have the Philips, the Royal Philips, so you have research as part of the functionality. And then you do have other branches of Philips that will work on a different kind of open innovations, probably just maybe support what entrepreneurs or other organizations do. And that's probably now within the foundation, just getting to see how you create shared value and how they invest, especially in innovation from the earlier stages. So there are those aspects at the beginning, just getting to see, do you want to domicile, let's say, that intellectual property within Philips? Does it stay with your partners or not? So just getting to see what could be considered open and what is proprietary, and being very direct about that from the beginning. And of course, having the different rules of engagement for whichever route that you use, but then allowing that both options then can occur.
Excellent. Brian, would you like to speak to this also?
Sure. I mean, I want to also say, I think it also heavily depends on the government or the location you're trying to implement. It's key to really understand the policies, more so around the data within these boundaries, so that you clearly work within those governing bodies. Because in most cases, each of these local governments have different policies on how medical or national data should be handled and who stores what. So in most cases, it's also good to really contextualize on the places you're going to implement. But also I think it's key to really clearly outline responsibilities and roles for this joint venture with the private sector, so that you clearly know who is generating what data and who has ownership over what data. Thank you.
Brian, I appreciate your comments. I have often felt, though, that sometimes I wish all of those arrangements had been made the day before I needed them. And often I don't realize that I need them until a particular moment. And so how do you play catch up?
Engaging and trying to convene all stakeholders. I mean, it's key as you're trying to make this joint venture with all the different players in private sector. In most cases, it's not to lock out in that bubble and think all you need is, for example, that pharma company that you're trying to create a partnership with, but also to look at every other stakeholder that would be involved, whatever level, and bring them onto these talks at an earlier moment, so that you get to understand their role and clearly map out what that roadmap would look like to a successful partnership.
Interesting. Catherine, you look like you want to comment on this. Did you want to comment on this issue of responsible partnerships with commercial entities?
Yes, I think my contribution would be that the partnership needs to be ethical, and that's from the perspective of the providers of data that is being
Catherine, we're having a slow transmission.
And that at the end of the day, of course, there's the do no harm, but I think the question, solution or product comes out of this, but better.
Thank you. Yes, now it's much better.
Okay, so I was saying that I think it will be from the ethical perspective and from the data from whom, from the participants from whom the data has been collected. And the biggest question would be, to whom does benefit accrue, and whether the suppliers of the data are going to be the ultimate beneficiaries of whatever solution or product is coming out of this partnership. And if that was not the case, that the suppliers of the data are not the beneficiaries, then I would be hesitant to enter into any kind of partnership.
That issue about accruing benefit is important. There's a lot of chat in the chatter about this issue, and we'll come back to this in a few minutes, but I actually want to turn to Julie and Catherine a little bit now to talk in a slightly different perspective. Julie, begin with the response to this item. Usually when interacting with stakeholders, specifically policymakers, time management and engagement are key elements. What are some of the learnings you can share with other researchers and academics that they should remember when facing that one opportunity to make this partnership?
Thank you very much, Patty. So in terms of engagement with government, especially policymakers, I think the one lesson that we learned is it takes time and you have to be patient. One of the problems that we all have is that we're driven either by a funding cycle or we're driven by a particular timeline, and we don't realize that in order for things to be taken on board by government, it will take time. The advantage that you get once you have government buy-in is that it becomes sustainable. So you don't have to worry about how things will continue after a funding cycle or after a particular initiative ends, because once it's taken on by the government, it becomes most of the time a long-term program or long-term activity. So it's really being able to see from the perspective of whether you're a scientist or the private sector, it's really being able to see that although you're looking at that opportunity that you're spending at the Ministry of Health or at the Ministry of Science and Technology, you may look at that and you may think that is a waste of time, but it is a really valuable long-term investment to do this. If you have that opportunity to have the 3-minute pitch or the 3-minute conversation with policymakers, I think a key thing that you need to have in mind is for you to demonstrate very early on the benefit that it will have to the community. So if you're talking about data science, if you're talking about genomics, if you're talking about health research, you have to be able to demonstrate how this will have an impact on individuals, because this is what drives and this is what determines policy.
Thank you very much. And I wonder if, Catherine, if you would also like to comment on the challenge here. And let me repeat, yes. What are some learnings you can share with other researchers and academics to help them manage the time management and the engagement necessary to build these partnerships?
I think what I'll add to what Julie has said is that there's always a mismatch between what scientists have and what policymakers need. And the scientists operate on different timescales than policymakers. As Julie has said, our funding is time bound, and so you have a limited time to produce results and share them and all that. But your time frame was not calibrated with the policymakers' time frame. They have different priorities at different points in time, and so as Julie has said, when you invest in these relationships, sometimes you're there when you have nothing. There's no research that you've produced that is relevant for anything, but you're just there as an expert. When they have documents, you look at them. When they have concept notes, you look at them. When they have new policies, you look at them. Sometimes they have nothing to do with your research or the evidence that you have. And then when that time comes and they want something done, then they ask you, can you do this for us? So if you've been engaged in long-term relationships, sometimes you're able to identify priorities that you can now embed in your own research programs. And at that time, when you're able to engage with the policymakers, even in your research project, by the time the results come, as Julie has said, there's a captive audience that because they can see exactly where that evidence is going to feed into. So long-term relationships, no expectations of quick results, and continuous advice that has nothing to do with specific evidence that you may have generated, and then eventually, hopefully, you get opportunities to fit your evidence into their own time frame.
That's really brilliant. I hear an issue of trust and timing, and recognizing that it's not your own agenda that is being met here, but several agendas. I'm going to turn to Brian now with a question that's a little technical focus, and then we'll ask Julie to follow up with a question related to this. Brian, how can we best integrate the use of digital tools in rural Africa, leveraging mobile technologies? Bearing in mind that not all healthcare workers are well trained in the use of digital tools, how can we strengthen the partnership between digital innovators and healthcare workers and healthcare systems?
Thanks for that. I mean, I think we need a broader understanding on what we call technology, and we need to closely work with these technicians. Most often what happens is what people that are developing these tools do, they develop the tools that think will be operational in these communities, yet they do not take time to go and study these communities and work with the practitioners and the users of these technologies to really find out if it's a perfect fit. So we normally over-deliver on a solution that is not really required in that context. So what should be actually done is to really strip down all these processes and understand what is required, what is the problem you're trying to solve in this context, and see what is the best way to deliver this solution. There are many ways, and in most cases, what everyone is thinking of, because there is a high penetration of smartphones, is that we shall use mobile technologies. But also, for example, mobile technologies, there are different levels of mobile technology. And in most cases, in the communities that we're working with, a solution as simple as an SMS-based solution may be the answer. So, but if you do not know what other people really use, and you do not want to provide the solutions that are going to really take or add more kind of load onto their normal workload, you're going to find that it's going to be hard for you to scale your solution in these communities. So it's key to understand the problem. It's key to understand the people you're working with, and understand the basic things like which kind of phones do they have if you want to use mobile technologies.
Yep.
Which kind of data plans do they have, airtime plans? Who is going to meet this cost? Is it you that is delivering the solution, or are they able to meet that cost? When you clearly get these points and iron them out, it becomes easier to deliver solutions to them, because they will be heavily targeted solutions, and they will really solve a problem and not be a bit ambiguous about what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to turn to Julie for a few minutes to ask her to reflect, please, on how we can bridge the gap between clinicians and data capture technologies. Does the field of informatics offer us some assistance in bringing clinicians into the technology age?
Yes, this is really an interesting question, and it's one of those examples of an area that has already, to a certain extent, progressed, driven by the health sector, and it's up to us as people working in the academic and research sector to kind of recognize what is already there. When you look at, certainly from the perspective of Africa, when you look at the investment that has been done with regards to data capture, whether you're looking at infectious disease like HIV, TB, malaria, or whether you're looking at areas such as maternal and child health, or non-communicable diseases such as diabetes or cardiovascular disease, there are already quite a lot of health informatics or health information management systems that are already in place. There are, of course, the traditional paper-based systems that are already there. We all know about, nurses, healthcare providers collecting registries that are filled with data, and the governments and government partners have invested quite a lot in digitizing some of these data. A good example is when you look at the immunization registry path, which is working and funded by the Gates Foundation, has invested in Tanzania and Zambia in an electronic immunization registry where they're digitizing immunization records. So that field has progressed quite significantly. The problem that we've encountered is that there has been difficulty in people recognizing that there is value in partnering. So you have a health information system that is managed by doctors, not doctors, but healthcare providers or hospitals, and they're generating data. There are a lot of data scientists, quote unquote, data scientists in that area, but they are, to a certain extent, either very protective of the data, or because of lack of experience and expertise, they're hesitant on sharing those data with researchers. So what normally happens is that you have duplication and parallel systems being formed. And this is extremely infuriating, because you look at the data that are being collected by scientists and you look at the data being collected by clinicians, it's exactly the same data. And so we have to spend a lot of time looking to see how we can interface the data, how we can export it one way or the other. And I'm hoping that by forming these new partnerships, we're able to open up these new channels of communication, because this will save a huge amount of resources, both in terms of financing, in terms of utilizing the expertise and experience that is already in place. Yeah.
That's really helpful. I'd like you to reflect just a little bit more about the issues of intellectual property rights, if you can, because you speak quite actively and clearly about the data issues. And yet the question of whether one can own data and whether there's property rights around data that one generates and who actually has it, the patient who's it describes, the institution who it holds, the clinician who gathered it. Are there best practices from around the world that African researchers and innovators could make use of as they think about this intellectual property issue?
Yes, great question. And one of the things that is in place are regulatory frameworks. And these are for data at institutional level, at national level, and at the level of Africa. So in terms of the policies, regulatory frameworks, these are present in terms of managing the data as well as intellectual property rights. I think what normally happens, and this is an issue that Catherine and several other people have raised, is the issue of equity and the issue of courage. And this is because most of the time, unfortunately, when you're working in research, the people who are generating the data, the people who are collecting the data, that their contribution to the process is not considered to be equitable to somebody who's using statistical analysis and complicated epidemiological models to analyze the data.
Yes, yes.
And so this is where the whole issue of ownership comes. And the only way we can address this is by strengthening the capacity of people who are generating the data, people who are analyzing the data and managing the data, to say that, no, we do not have to send the data out of Africa. We can analyze the data here, and look, we can actually apply these data to improve health or to improve health policy. So usually when it comes to intellectual property, it is the laws and the policies are in place. The second thing that is we have to talk about is the issue that there have been really bad practices when it comes to data ownership and data use. And again, this feeds back to what Catherine has said and Beatrice about shared values, where data are generated, and then when the data come back, the communities that generated the data, whether they're the patient communities, whether it's scientists, whether it's healthcare providers, they do not see the value of the data that they generated. And so this becomes an issue of trust. This becomes an issue of ethics. And,
yes.
And we just have to be able to talk openly about bad practices where data being generated in Africa and being stored here. And I think one of the things that has changed considerably over the past 10, 15 years is really the capacity of centers in Africa, not only just collecting data, but managing and archiving the data that are available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go on with another question, but I first want to pause and thank the panelists who are answering some of the questions in the chat. So please take a look there if you're wondering about your question. We're trying to get to as many as we can. I now have a question that I want Beatrice to start with, but I'm going to ask Aisha and maybe Julie to comment on. And that is, what are the 3 deal breakers in private sector academic partnerships, and from both the private sector and the academic perspectives? Could you begin the comment, Beatrice?
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yeah, I missed the last part of your ask.
Sure.
Please just run it by me again. Yes.
We're looking for your thoughts about what are the deal breakers? What are the deal breakers between when you're trying to establish a public-private partnership from the academic perspective, and then from the private sector perspective?
Okay, so from the academic perspective, of course, there's the ethical part of it. It does need to be ethical. It does need to be legal. So we've noticed a few people probably might want to test out innovations or something that they have built, but will probably not go through the ethics. So at Philips, we're very, very strict about having, basic things like your ethical approvals in place, just ensuring that even people know you're collecting their data, you're using it, and for what purpose there is. Of course, just overseen by mostly the requirements of the GDPR, for example, in Europe. That's a very strict one. And you notice that, and here I'm speaking mostly because I imagine the question was there, especially from an entrepreneurship point of view, entrepreneurs that would like to work with Philips, but even other organizations. If you do work with that academic institution, of course, they understand the rigors of needing to have your ethical processes in place and your documents especially. So it needs to be ethical. It needs to be legal. I know that sounds very basic, but you'd be surprised that it's not always considered the default things. It actually needs to be legal, and just ensuring that the legalities that are required are in place. I think for us, it's a very key thing because if you're looking at Philips, you'll mostly just not look at let's say your data acts or your data regulation and policies just present at the local level, but also globally. So they need to be very strictly followed depending on where you're based on. That's the second one. The third one, which is mostly business related, is strategy. It needs to align to the Philips strategy, of course. Otherwise, then everything they work on needs to go towards a certain direction. So if you want to work with Philips, one of the things you need to find out about Philips is what are they working on? What are they doing? So primary healthcare, for example, in Africa is a big thing for us. I was just looking through the questions and I saw something about how do you even get to the rural areas where most of the population is actually when you're looking at healthcare. So just primary healthcare, as has been mentioned, maternal child health, there's the rise of the non-communicable diseases, the cardiovascular diseases, you have the infectious diseases that have been a challenge for us for the longest time. But just how do you have impact from the primary healthcare level? And how do you use then your digital solutions to be able to improve that? So the legalities, the ethics, and just strategic alignment. If that is not in sync, then that is more or less a deal breaker for us.
That is really helpful. Can I also have a few additional comments on this from Aisha, and then we're going to go to Julie about public-private partnerships. What are the deal breakers and what makes them? What should we worry about?
Yeah, I think that actually Beatrice covered a lot of it from a private sector perspective. I think obviously, definitely the ethics is absolutely important. And you know, the different types of populations that you might be working with to do some of these innovations and to test new ideas is to make sure that's in place. And I know that even, you know, from an ethical perspective, there are the institutions that are within a specific country, but even internally, at least within our organization, we also heavily vet health-related opportunities as well, both from an ethical perspective as well as for a strategy and alignment perspective. Also something that Beatrice talked about. So I think, you know, if we are, you know, sort of following the rules of the game and those elements are in place, I'm a believer in anything is possible. But I do think, you know, it's whether or not you want to run with wind behind your back or not. So it's great. We're a technology company. There's certain technical capabilities that we can bring as IBM where it may not make sense for us to be doing other aspects of healthcare and healthcare delivery that don't leverage technology and computation. And so it just doesn't make sense, as much as it might be nice to work with IBM. If that's not necessarily our greatest strength and in our strategy, then that might not make sense. So I think it's about choosing the right relationships and leveraging the strengths of the different partners.
That's really, really interesting. Beatrice, if you want to make a comment on that, and I'm sorry, Beatrice or Julie, but I also want to make sure we hear from Catherine, because I want to know if there's a policy lever to help with some of these bottlenecks. Beatrice or Julie, would you like to add anything? I'm not hearing anything, so either you prefer not to try to speak now or your mute is still on. So let me turn to Catherine for a minute. Could you talk, are there policy levers to help with these deal breakers in academic private sector partnerships?
I think at least from my experience and the kind of space that I play in, the same policies around that guide research in the first place would apply.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mentioned earlier about to whom benefit accrues. So there are all those policies around doing no harm and making sure there is autonomy and that participants are protected and data privacy and all that. So I don't think at the kind of space I play in, there wouldn't be anything that would be different. And they already, most countries have, well-established systems around data protection, data privacy, and protection of the sources of data. So for me, those would be at play.
Thank you. We'll come back to Beatrice and Julie in just a moment. Now I'd like to ask Brian, and then maybe Aisha and Beatrice to speak to how can we address the valley of death along the commercialization pipeline as we try to bring affordable technologies to scale, rather than focusing on strategies to make corporate social responsibility. Are there ways that we can pool risk so that larger companies might actually be willing to take on some of these riskier technologies to get them to market? Brian.
I think that one of the best way we can overcome this valley of death is really trying to realize which kind of partnerships you're looking at and clearly articulate what the role of the different partners would be. If you are able to identify those early enough, then you know what value the other person brings on the table, and then you can easily reach out to them to see that you collaborate, and then pull in other resources that you do not have in most cases in-house, so that you can move faster than the way you would first do the training in-house and see that you grow. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. Would Aisha or Beatrice like to comment on this issue of how can we get through the valley of death so that promising technologies actually get to deliver?
Okay, I can comment on that. So for us, I think it's just how you design your solution from the beginning. Please go to the market. I like to call it the market. Please go to the end user or the person you're envisioning will use your solution. So one of the pitfalls is that we'll probably come up with a really cool app or a really cool solution, and we're very intrigued about it as, let's say, innovators or people who just develop it, and then you take it to market at the tail end of your build process. So you end up finding out things that you could have found out earlier that were helpful to your process. And one of the things I always like asking when we're having our exploration processes, what's the willingness to pay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, in healthcare, we've had quite a challenge, at least in the African continent from experience. People will spend money on different things, but just getting people to save up for health insurance is tricky, or even spend for healthcare. One is because we're a very communal community. So probably when you have a healthcare incident, the experience is that maybe your family or your friends will help you just pay for that bill, for example. But then sometimes I cannot pay for something I don't see value in. So one of the biggest things that can help the commercialization process from the beginning, talk to the market, so that you build a solution that's closely aligned with what the problem is for your envisioned customer or end user, and how you add value. So I mentioned at the beginning, shared value, creating value. What does your value proposition look like? So it's a bit getting out of your head as a researcher or a very strongly academic thinking person, and just thinking more a bit of a business, mindset, so to speak, and just going through, let's say the startups have quite a lot of experience with this, especially if you're using methodologies like your Lean startup, whereby from the beginning you need to talk to your potential customer and figure out how that looks like. So that's a big one. Because you want to eventually move from funds, and it's a really great initiative that let's say the NIH have given, but they only take you so far. If you get to a place whereby your end users or your customers can actually purchase your solutions or invest in them, then that's your longer term process because they see value. So after the grants have run out, after let's say your research funding has run out, then you need to be able to transition that to a business case that works. So right. Academics and entrepreneurs need to think about business cases from the beginning and how that looks like.
Aisha, would you like to make a closing comment on that?
So,
I'm sorry. Yeah, Aisha.
Oh, hey. Sorry. Yes. So I think actually Beatrice covered a lot of the key points, again, coming from private sector. I would just add that just really kind of thinking about the end user is a very key part here. In some cases, the solutions that you develop might just be some set of analytics. So you might get percentages or numbers or something like that that help to inform the decision-making process. And so it's about how do you present that in a way so that the decision-making process based on the analytics and the data or the evidence and insights that you provide is in context. So when you say, you know, we need, in order to eradicate or end HIV, we need to have, everyone needs to have access to ABC. Well, is that a realistic number in the context of your specific country or region that you're looking at this? So I think that that's one complementary element of the end user, understanding the end user. And then at the same time, you know, could be how do you deliver it through these different devices and so forth. So there's a journey and a process. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brian wants to have the real last comment on this question.
Right.
Just to build up from what Beatrice and Aisha were saying, I think, yes, it's key to build up the business case, but also to create these quick kind of iteration cycles within the feedback you get from these users that you have and the product or the service that you're trying to deliver. That way, your business is stronger, but you also create these iterations faster, and then which builds a great case for also your private sector partners.
So we are just coming up to the end of our time for question and answer, and we will be going into our small group discussions in just a few minutes. But I want to remind everyone who's listening, you can continue to post questions on KI Storm. It's possible for you to continue to reflect and ask and enter the dialogue there. And as we're getting ready to go into our small group discussions, I'm going to leave one last question for our panelists, and I asked them for a brief response to this one, but it's a big one. What aspects of the Pan-African partnerships now are key to ensuring equitable inclusion of stakeholders outside of the large urban areas? Brian, are you ready to take that on? It's a hard one, I said.
Let me think through it a little bit more. Someone else can take it on first.
So someone who's got experience in working with outreach in rural and non-urban areas.
Hello. Hi, this is Julie. I'm happy to answer. Hi, I'm happy to answer this. You're right. It is a very big question, and a couple of things. One is that when you look at Africa and a lot of African countries, there's a huge urbanization. So one of the things that we've come across is, whilst we're dealing with making sure that we are able to reach populations in the rural areas, we also need to be aware of people in the urban setting who may not be as accessible as one would assume. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in terms of ensuring equitable inclusion, is that a lot of countries, again, have invested, and this is both at public, from the public sector and the private and philanthropic sector. There's been a huge investment in terms of accessing populations in all over, and using, whether it's mobile phones, other digital platforms. I think to a certain extent, coverage in terms of being able to access or get information, data, as well as communicating information. So this is two-way transmission. I think this is quite impressive. If you look at what has been happening during this COVID-19 pandemic, and you see the way communities have been able to be reached, I think this is an area that can be addressed, or the barriers in this area can be addressed very quickly. The other aspect that I wanted to bring about is the issue of community health workers. And Africa, many African countries have a lot of community health workers who have been capacitated to utilize, generate data and utilize it. And so that's another platform that we can use as part of data science. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I'm going to ask Catherine if she wants to have the last word on this and then we'll hand back to Maggie and the moderating team. Catherine, do you have a comment on the Pan-African partnerships to address reach into the rural areas?
I think what I wanted to say is that it may not necessarily be addressing populations outside urban centers, but it may be able to address decision-making at subnational level, away from the central, the center of power, usually at the national government. And that when you look at the data ecosystem in any country, some of the data communities actually include those that are involved in service delivery and decision-making, but at subnational level, depending on the governance structure that exists in a specific country. And many times the focus is on decentralized systems, and there's neglect of those small data systems where lots of decisions are being made. So when I think about how to make the partnerships more equitable, I would say that those partnerships need to move from the global to the national, but also consider subnational level investments into data systems, as well as subnational level partnerships that are going to support very large, very active decision-making for some of the stakeholders at that level.
Thank you so much. These are very interesting perspectives, especially that being unreachable is not just a matter of distance and the sub-country, sub-sector decision makers. I'm going to turn to Puleng now. Thank you very, very much to my panelists. Your responsiveness was tremendous. Your on point and interesting comments were very much appreciated. Puleng?
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for a very thoughtful discussion. It was very interesting to listen to. Thank you for the way you engaged with the questions. It was really phenomenal. And we look forward to hearing from you again later. But for now, we just want to give everyone an opportunity to talk to other people in this platform. So it's now your turn to talk to one another, and would like you to go into breakaway rooms. Now, when you get into the breakaway rooms, you'll have a chance to discuss with each other some questions, firstly introduce yourselves, and then discuss a question around what kind of partnerships are needed in data science and in health. So you'll have about 20 minutes, and we'll send you some notices to keep you aware of time. So please make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk, especially introducing themselves and sharing where they come from, and then a chance to share about their response to the question. Once you are ready, Joe will set up the breakout rooms and you'll get ready to go. Now remember that if you accidentally get bumped out of a breakaway room, you can always come back into the plenary room, and then we'll put you back into a group. So you can go to the help page on Storm, and we'll help you from there, and then you can come into the plenary room, and then we'll get you into the breakaway rooms. So when you get in there, introduce yourselves quickly, tell the people that you're with where you come from, talk to each other about what kind of new partnerships are needed in data science and in health, and then connect to one another. You'll have 20 minutes to do so. And in a minute, Joe is going to set up those breakaway rooms and send you into groups of 4. You'll have 20 minutes, and when you come back, we'll welcome you back into the main plenary. Thank you. Over to you, Joe.
Got everybody back yet, Joe? We're still waiting for a few more people? So I'm wondering, did you meet interesting people? Did you have some rich discussions? Can I see some head nodding? We have you muted because we're such a large group, so it would be a cacophony of sound. But shake your head if you met some interesting people, had some rich discussions. I know some of the rooms were had more people in them than others, but we're glad for those of you who are able to have a rich discussion. We are too large a group to hear about each and every breakout, but we're really curious. So if you came to any conclusions about what's needed for data science partnerships, any key ideas about the kinds of partnerships that we need in data science and health that came up in your breakout discussions, we invite you to type those into the chat box so we can all benefit from your small group discussions. We really love to see and read your insights. So if you're inclined to say, well, what we learned, or what came up for us, or we really agreed that, or something like that, put it in the chat so we can all benefit from it. And Dr. Brennan, I come back to you now and the panelists to share your closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And thanks to all of our participants here, because the hard work of a conference like this happens in these groups. We're going to have some closing remarks from our panelists right now. And I want to remind you all to please watch the chat because there's interesting comments coming in. We're also going to be reminding you about the office hours for the FOAs that will be held at the end of next week. So please remember the conference goes on long after the day. Let me turn first to Aisha, please, and have your closing remarks.
Yeah, so in the spirit of the closing remarks around, what is the greatest wish that as an outcome from this? So I think just thinking about it is just being really cognizant that at the end of the day, we are thinking about data science and technologies for healthcare, but most importantly, it's people. They're humans. Even your partnerships are with people. And so being able to understand their perspective, understand where they're coming from, listening, see their challenges and both ways. So I think the most important part is really, who you partner with. It might sound great as a name, but the individuals actually matter, and they matter a lot in terms of the success and the outcomes of the project. So you want that excitement, that energy on the ideas that you all are putting forth. And you want folks that you can collaborate and talk about difficult things like how to deploy a certain technology in a rural area or rural areas of Africa. So my wish overall is that through the spirit of collaboration, we have a stronger understanding of each other, given the vastness of Africa and the diversity of the cultures, and that we make a transformative difference through this program and many other programs, especially for healthcare delivery in Africa, and that some of these solutions are replicated around the world. So I think that we can be leaders in innovation for healthcare and healthcare delivery in Africa. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Let me turn now to Beatrice for your closing comments.
So I think I'll just make mostly 3 closing comments. The first one is we need to invest in primary healthcare. So when I'm saying invest in terms of the academia, whether it's for profit or non-profit in terms of the other organizations, just needing to invest in primary healthcare. Because a lot of our population lives in the rural areas, and your most accessible form of care at that level is primary healthcare. So I know, for example, Kenya has launched recently the strategy for primary healthcare. And it's need to just see how can we apply, let's say, digital solutions or just data science to strengthen that kind of delivery at the front line. To support our workers at that level, we have a very low physician or healthcare worker to patient in Africa. So if we can find a way to strengthen their contribution to the community using these tools, that would be a really great win. Because for me, a win is that at the grassroots level, then this effect is actually felt and it's affordable for them as much as possible. That's one. Second comment is please bring something to the table when you have your partnerships. And it's not always about the money, it's even just about the talent. Just being able to invest in your skill as a data scientist. We're always growing, always, I think the technology is changing a lot. So trying to see how we can bring the partnership, especially between academia and industry, to just strengthen our talent pool and support them is very important. That's a big one. And then finally is we need to work with governments. Governments are a huge stakeholder for healthcare in Africa. And when we're talking about priorities, how do we ensure that impact is felt at the most grassroots of levels, is that there's need to partner with governments, understand what their strategy is like for healthcare, understand their priorities, and even when you do go around the policy table, it's not just to push your agenda as an organization, but to just really listen to what the issues are and where you can plug in, so that then we diversify our investments and even just our contribution based on the need, not just where the funding is directed towards. And here I think I'm making a case particularly for non-communicable diseases where there's not been much support before. And I think finally I want to say thank you so much, Patty, and the entire team for just inviting us as Philips to this particular forum. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Catherine and Julie to give a 30-second soundbite so we can turn back to Punang in just a moment.
So Catherine here. I think my closing remarks, I'll say that science, innovation, and data-driven decision-making can, and they do happen in low-resource settings, and that science, innovation, and decision-making can thrive from just happening to thriving in low-resource settings with more significant interventions and investments in the whole data ecosystems in those settings. Interventions and investments that are equitable in their focus on the less developed and endowed data communities in such ecosystems, and investments that build infrastructure but also strengthen the data use culture and sustainable capacity to continuously strengthen those communities. And these less endowed ecosystems include academia, they include national level government and subnational level sector specific data systems, and that such interventions or investments should endeavor to strengthen linkages and partnerships between these communities and the more developed and endowed communities within the national ecosystem to ensure that the full value of data and science are realized for the benefit of society. Otherwise, it was great. I enjoyed myself and I hope to keep connected. Thank you.
Julie and Brian, 30 seconds each. Julie?
Thank you, Patty. So my key message, or the greatest wish, is really for us to use this data science initiative as a platform to really integrate all the various activities that are ongoing, activities and data that are being generated in the health sector, in the research sector, and in education. There's a lot of opportunity, and if we work together, we will be able to make an impact in health, and obviously my passion is sickle cell disease. The second thing is the issue of equity and the importance of really understanding the value of all the partners that are involved in activities, from patient communities or from communities to health policy and government, and really recognizing that no one body or institution or sector can do this alone. We really need to work together. And I think data science is a fantastic platform that will bring disparate people and disparate communities together to solve some of the key areas that come across. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brian, last word.
Thank you very much. So I think my last word would be, let's use the platform to build a stronger ecosystems, and that will help us build the local capacity and the local talent in the continent, but also help us build the relationships that are key in scaling up any of the solutions that we have, or any of the solutions around the data science.
Thank you so much. Thank you to my excellent panel. And I will thank you all for attending and turn back to Punang now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Brennan and all the panelists. That was a very rich discussion about the importance and impact of strong partnerships. Thank you so much for your time. Now, as we draw close, we would like to remind you of a few things about tomorrow. So tomorrow on Wednesday, we're going to have a panel on harnessing innovation and entrepreneurship in data science for health. So just like today, we have collected a very interesting group of panelists and experts and innovation and entrepreneurship experts, including the Minister of Science and Technology and Innovation from the government of Uganda, which is where we were really supposed to be for this virtual symposium. And we are glad that he can join us here virtually. So please come here tomorrow at 9 a.m. EST and 4 p.m. EAT. So please, 4 p.m. Eastern African time and 9 a.m. EST. So we encourage you to please preview the innovation and entrepreneurship panelists videos in advance. Or if you don't have a time to do so, then come, let's do the screening together of their videos. And this is scheduled to happen just an hour before the interactive panel discussion. So please join us again tomorrow. Come for the screening an hour before. After that, we'll have the interactive panel. The theme tomorrow is innovation and entrepreneurship. It's been wonderful to have you, and I'll hand over to my colleague, Maggie.
just to say that on Thursday, Puleng told you about Wednesday, but on Thursday, we are doing a partnership and innovation marketplace, which should prove to be a very interesting experience of mixing and matching and hearing from different potential partners and talking to other collaborators. So we encourage you to join that. We'll be starting at 8 o'clock Eastern time in the US, 3 o'clock Eastern Africa time, and we'll have more information about that on KaiStorm, so keep your eyes there. And speaking of networking, I just wanted to very quickly show you a little thing about the Network Lounge. You've seen the Network Lounge. It's on the KaiStorm. You can go through and you'll be here in a thing called Spatial Chat. You can accept it so you can have your camera and your microphone. Look, there's Emma. She's typing in her name. She's saying hi. She's going to join the party. When you join, they'll give you some instructions to help you understand how to use this, how to make your icon move around, how to be close to people, how to find other people who are in there. And then once you get in there, you'll see that there are several stations, different tables, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables. You can move your person over to a table. And when you're close to somebody, you can hear them. You can go over and look at the tab, go back to another table. You can connect with people. So we invite you to think about, if you want to continue any conversations that you've had here that are good, or you meet someone that you meet during the rest of the program, we invite you to make an appointment. You can say, meet me in the Network Lounge at table 6. I'll be there at 7 o'clock, whatever. It's a nice place to meet people if you want to join someone there in particular, or you can just go in randomly and see who you run into. With that, I think there's a quick poll in the chat. It's just a very quick exit poll to give us some feedback on your experience today so we can make sure we continue to make these sessions useful and pertinent and relevant to you. And for those of you who are really interested in the Q&A that came in the chat, or any of the insights that were written in the chat that came up after the breakout session, if you go to the bottom of your chat menu, there are 3 little dots. You click on them, there's an opportunity to save the chat. And you can save the chat on your own computer and review it later to take advantage of the answers to the questions and the rich insights that came from the breakout groups. With that, I want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Brennan, and all of the panelists. Thank you. Have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow, hopefully right back here. Bye-bye.
Bye now.